Is going over the settlement limit in Civilization 7 actually worth it? It's a question I've been asking myself for the last couple of weeks, and a question that we will look to answer in today's video. We'll also look to provide some golden rules that you'll be able to take away and implement in your gameplay. And if you're interested in playing this seed, then make sure you check out the Discord where I'll leave it uploaded for you. So let's get to it and talk a little bit about going above the settlement limit and the problems that it may face. So the first thing that we'll talk about before we get into the golden rules is just the consequences of settling. Obviously, we know when we want to settle, right? You see a good settlement, you say, I want to deny that from my enemy. Look at that one over there, that's next to a volcano. We want that tile, we want to settle it. But what are the consequences of it? Well, there's two main consequences that you're going to be looking at. The first one, when you go over your settlement limit, is a global happiness consequence. So that means if you've got 3 settlements and then you then settle a 4th settlement, that on a global level, your happiness is going to be reduced by 5 for each of these settlements because you've gone over that settlement limit by 1, and it is a 5 penalty. If you were to go over that limit by 2, it would then be a 10 penalty for each of your settlements, and that is a global penalty. The way that global happiness works is quite interesting. The way that they compare it is to income, but there's one key difference. Global happiness gets added up at the end of your turn, but they only add the positive happiness. They don't add the negative happiness. And it means that if you've got cities, like we've got Parsa right now, that's at -2, you can completely ignore that when it comes to your global happiness. And it means that towns like Raga to the south, who have got a positive happiness of 4, are going to be single-handedly pushing us towards our celebration, because that's where your global happiness is going. As you slowly contribute more and more happiness towards your celebration, you will approach it. You can see at the moment we're 133 turns away from our celebration, but as we get happier, that is going to increase. And one of the ways that we can get happier might be with an army commander by moving them or stationing them into a settlement. But another way that you can do it, a nice little cool technique that I've come across today, is you can go ahead and just put a happiness resource in there, and that'll take your happiness. We can look right here from 4 up to 6. And what that's going to do is that's going to push our global happiness up. And now it means that instead of being 133 turns, we're only 89 turns away from our celebration. So that's a cool little technique that you can do if ever you're in trouble in the early game with your settlements. So now that we've talked about global happiness, let's talk about local happiness and the effects that it has on our settlements. Because each time we apply this negative happiness to our settlements, it reduces the yields as long as we're going below 0. So in Sparta, as an example, we currently sit at -7 happiness. What that means is that our yields start to take a hit. It's not just that Sparta is not contributing towards the global happiness, but that these yields are being reduced. Sparta has a base yield of 9 food, but it's only producing 7.7 because of our unhappiness that is local to Sparta. Now, that will change depending on whichever town or settlement that you're looking at. Here, we've only got -4, so the loss that we're going to be having from a -4 is going to be less than the loss that we'd be having from a -7. So that is the local component of the happiness. So now that we're aware of those two things, let's talk about the consequences of expansion and get into our golden rules. Golden rule number 1. If you're settling a contested location, ignore the settlement limit. That's it. Nice and simple. If you are looking to expand and you've got all of these places that you can expand, just pretty much ignore it. Don't even look at it. Don't even think about it. That's the first golden rule. Now, there's going to be important components of that, okay? The speed at which you're expanding, the speed at which you're researching, because all of these are going to be contributing to the end goal. And the truth is, if you've got 8, 9, 10 settlements, you're going to be having an insanely negative production and food build up that is on your towns upon all of your settlements. But the truth is, and this is where our second golden rule comes in, there is a way out of it. And that way is through increasing your settlement cap. So when it comes to contesting your spawns, or rather contesting your city locations, I think the best caveat for that golden rule is within reason, right? Like if you've spawned in the middle of the map and there's 8 leaders around you in every single direction, and every single direction is it's a contested spawn, we still need to treat those reasonably. We can't just go and settle all 17 potential towns because that's what one more turn said to do. It's about making sure that we operate within the other golden rules as well. So let's get on to our second golden rule. And that is to be aware of your max settlement cap and do your best to stay at most 1 above it. That's normally the highest that I would go. So if I've got a max settlement cap of 6, that means I would only ever really look to go to 7. If I've got a max of 8, I would only really look to go to 9. So how do you find out your max cap? So you start at 3. Everybody starts at 3. From there, you'll be able to pick up 1 at irrigation. You'll be able to pick up a second point at organized military, and you'll be able to pick up a third settlement limit at entertainment. That goes from 3 up to 6. Now we get into the Civ-specific stuff. Some civilizations don't have any extra settlement cap. Others have got 1, and others have got 2. Today, we're playing as Persia, and Persia has actually got 2. If we take a look at the unique civics, you'll have one that's available down here in the mastery, which gives 1+1 settlement limit, and then we've also got one over here, which is another mastery. So we've got a max cap of 8. So the golden rule is that we shouldn't be operating an empire at least or anything more than 9. And the reason why that is because we can manage the unhappiness in the early stages of the game quite easily, because the number of settlements that we've got is low. If we're going from 3 settlements to 4, we're going to be putting 20 happiness across all of those settlements. However, when we go from 8 settlements to 9 settlements, now all of a sudden we're going to minus 45 happiness across that. And that is going to continue to compound as you add more settlements in. You're going to have minus 10 happiness across all of the settlements, which means on your 10th settlement, you've now got minus 100 happiness across your entire empire. And of course, like all good golden rules, there are exceptions to that, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But I will just say right now, there are combinations that you can play, leaders and civilizations. Ashoka, I'm looking at you. Moria, I'm looking at you, where you can completely ignore the happiness penalties that are associated with expansion on crazy levels. But this video is not for them. It's not for Ashoka. It's not for Mora, especially not for them together, which we'll probably look to do another video on, because you don't even need to observe the limit for settlements. But let's move on now to our third point. If you're actively working on your next settlement limit, you can feel free to go over your settlement limit by 1. Generally, we should be looking to try and stay within our settlement limits, because there's some key components that can really affect us. So as we previously discussed, we are at the moment at 89 turns away from our celebration. However, if we go ahead and put ourselves up 1 settlement limit, so we're at 5 out of 3, and now all of a sudden we move over to 5 out of 4 because we've researched irrigation. That is now going to change to 36 turns until our next celebration. If we go ahead and get our next technology, which is going to be organized military, this is going to give us another settlement limit. It's going to push our global happiness up. If let's just make sure that it's actually resetting. So at the moment we're at 14. And we're going to go ahead and hit that button. So just to double check, we're at 36 turns. And now, once again, we'll roll over. This is going to make everybody absolutely happy. And now we should see we're at plus 34 happiness. And what that's going to do is it's going to mean our next celebration is in 15 turns. So within the space of just like 3 decisions, right? Like putting the wool in here and then getting that settlement limit back, it's all of a sudden meant that we are now very close to our next celebration within tangible distance. Now, keep in mind, the speed that we're playing on here today is not online speed. We're playing on standard speed. And that is apparently because online speed was causing too many mistakes in our data, so it wasn't admissible. So we've reverted back to the standard speed. So that's essentially where we're at the moment. By the way, if you want to grab the save, check out the Discord, because we've got this exact save, exact speed. I think we're playing on the daily difficulty. This is a really fun save. Just to go a bit off topic, there are 3 natural wonders on this save. So enjoy. It's very good for your Isabella enjoyers. So let's move on to our next point, which is our 4th golden rule. Found good settlements rather than a lot of settlements. In Civ 5, you had an option. You can play tall, you can play wide, you can play with liberty, you can play with tradition. In Civ 6, it was more about having a lot of settlements or a lot of cities. In Civ 7, I think it's going to be more important to focus on the quality of your cities and towns rather than the quantity of them. And that means really making sure that the cities that you're settling have got tiles that they can work, but more importantly, have got decent adjacencies that they can look for. So as an example, we've got an absolutely crazy adjacency that is right here. I'm sure you can imagine what's going to go right down in the middle. Of course, we're going to look to try and maximize our adjacencies here. And this is something that will happen as you get better, as you'll be able to recognize these sorts of things and go, okay, well, that looks like a great spot for a library to go down. So we'll look to put that down. But the key distinction here is going to be making sure that you're able to differentiate between what might be a good settlement and what might be a bad settlement. And part of that is identifying which ones are going to be cities and which ones are going to be towns. Because typically your cities, you want them to be production powerhouses. You want them to have a lot of production like this. We've got a heap of production on these tiles. We're looking at 10 production right here, 13 including the city. Up towards this position, we've got a lot of food, but we've also got quite a bit of rough terrain in here that we can turn into mines. So this is also another great candidate. Something that was out on the limits. So if we look here, 1, 2, 3 tiles away. So this right here could be a city candidate. This doesn't have a lot of production, but you know what it does have? It's got a lot of water tiles, and there's no reason why this couldn't be a perfect feeder town for our capital. So even though this might not look like a good settlement, it actually is, because it serves its purpose of being that feeder town. All we want it to do is take the water tiles, get all the food off the water tiles, and serve it straight to the capital. That's what it's going to do, and it's going to do that quite well. So understanding the purpose of the settlement and looking to found settlements that are supporting that purpose is incredibly important. Let's move on to our 5th rule. And this is an incredibly important one, and one that really we need to observe almost all of the time. And that's, do not settle off fresh water unless it means a very strong bonus. And what do I mean by a strong bonus? I mean a high adjacency. So if you can see a beautiful spot for a monument, so as an example in here, there's a 4 adjacency monument. And if to get to this spot, or to be able to put down in here, we had to settle off fresh water, then you could make an argument for it. I still probably wouldn't do that, but it could be an option for you. Further to that, if you've got a crazy adjacency like this one down here and you can't get to it, or there's no good city locations unless you somehow settle off water, then you can definitely do it. But I would say from a more objective perspective, settling your towns on fresh water is almost mandatory. Settling your cities off fresh water is less mandatory. It's still very important, but it's not mandatory. And the reason why is just because of those adjacencies. So if we settle off fresh water here, and we have a crazy good adjacency, we're going to be able to take advantage of it with a city, but we can't take advantage of it with a town, because a town's not going to be able to build a monument unless we're playing as Augustus, or we're not going to be able to build a library over here unless we've actually converted it over to a city. And that's a key component of converting cities over in the early game, is making sure that they get these yields online. So just rehashing those 5 golden rules. Number 1, if you're settling a contested location, ignore the settlement limit within reason. Don't go to 14 settles. It's crazy, because we still need to observe rule number 2, golden rule number 2, which is to be aware of your maximum settlement cap and do your best to stay at most 1 above it. Number 3, if you're actively working on your next settlement limit, you can feel free to go over it by 1. So that means that if I've got 3 settlements, I don't think we really talked too much about that, so let's just go into depth a bit here just to make sure that we've covered it. If I've got 3 settlements here and I'm working on irrigation, I can feel happy knowing that I'm going to put down this 4th settlement here, and I'm not going to be punished a huge amount. I'm going to be able to offset the happiness penalties that are associated by going over that in the short term, eventually in the long term. So I'm not fussed from that perspective. And then number 4 is we want to found good settlements rather than a lot of settlements, and good settlements are defined by whether they're cities and towns, with cities being high production locations that have got high adjacencies, whereas towns are prioritized about whether they can feed. And that's going to be the key component. The key difference is going to be about whether they can feed the cities, because that's the primary purpose of them. It's to empower those cities that are nearby, make sure they're all connected. And then the 5th and the final golden rule is do not settle off fresh water unless it means a particularly strong bonus. One thing I didn't mention, but it's obviously incredibly important, the reason why we don't do this is because when we settle off fresh water, we take a happiness penalty. So every city, every settlement starts off with a base of 3 happiness, and we can see that right here. That's on the town hall. Technically, it's called a city hall, but I call it a town hall because these are towns, not cities. However, if you settle off fresh water, you would have a -5 penalty, and that won't show you straight away. So if you were to go in and check and settle and then reload the turn and then compare it, that wouldn't actually it wouldn't show you on the UI. What you'd have to do is you'd have to roll it over to the next turn. And I remember testing it out. It took me about 30-40 minutes to actually realize, hold on a minute, no, there is something here, because you got to wait for the next turn and then the rollover happens. And obviously, if we were to extrapolate the differences between settling on fresh water with your cap versus not settling on fresh water on your cap, it's huge. Just because it's going to delay your first celebration, and then because you've delayed your first celebration, you delay your second policy slot, and now because you've delayed your second policy slot, you've delayed the culture or the production or the science that you're getting. It slows you down so much. It is just not worth it. And the only circumstance that you would ever want to really do it is if there's a city that you cannot fit any other way onto the landscape that you've got other than by putting it on a location that doesn't have access to fresh water. The final thing that we'll touch on, which is still a relevant factor here, is the commander, the army commander. The way that it works is very interesting. I'll say right now, I don't know 100%. So just keep in mind, and I should probably caveat this entire video by saying, keep in mind, the information I'm providing you at the moment is based on 400 hours that I've got in Civ 7 and an extensive, obsessive, compulsive desire to just research and understand the inner workings, because the Civilopedia doesn't really give me much to work with. And I want to know how these things tick. And I tell you what, right now, the Army Commander has been one of the most confusing things. These are what I know about the Army Commander. First and foremost, I know that it's bugged. Let's see if we can get the bug to work. One, we'll fire here. Never mind. We can't get the bug to work because we accidentally fired. Never mind. That's a bug for another video. I probably shouldn't show that exploit. So let's talk about how it interacts with unhappiness. So the Army Commander reduces unhappiness that's in the existing settlement. So the existing settlement, if it's got a negative happiness amount, then the Army Commander will reduce that. However, you don't actually have to be in a negative happiness state to be getting the bonus. As an example, if Parser right now has got 6 happiness, but if we take a look at its its happiness totals, you'll see that it's got a minus deduction of 4. And this is because of the buildings that it's got within here. We've got a library and we've got a monument. So this is giving a 4 minus 4 happiness. So if we were to go ahead and buy a Army Commander in here, you'll see that our happiness should rise from 6. It's only going to be slight. It'll probably go to like 7 point, maybe like 6.3. I'm going to go with 6.3. Let's have a look and see. 6.3. There we go. So it goes to 6.3, and that is because it is offsetting the happiness bonuses or the happiness burdens that the monument and the library are putting upon this city. Now, it doesn't work for specialists. If you were to get a specialist and you were to assign it to this city, that would not be affected. You would not have a reduced amount of upkeep on that specialist for unhappiness. However, when you go to war, so if we were to declare war right now, what's going to happen is, so do we have someone we can move? We do. We have Raga. So what's going to happen is we're very happy at the moment 9, and the moment that we declare war, let's declare war with our friends because that's going to have even more of an impact. So when we declare this war, that's going to provide war weariness or war support. My understanding is the way that this works is based on that war support. So at the moment now we've gone down to 5.6. That's going to be reduced in Raga. If we take a look over at Sparta, we're at -8. Now, as far as I'm aware, if we put points into this, this should technically come up. Let's take a look and see. Now we're at 1. So because we've gone back down to 0 war weariness or war support, this has allowed this to actually, get back towards happiness. So that's another key component of happiness that we probably didn't need to include in this video, but I thought it relevant to share anyways because it's part of the commander. So at the moment we're sitting at 8.3, but if we take the commander out, that's going to drop down to 7. So there are going to be, diminishing returns probably isn't the correct term for it. I believe there's a flat bonus as well as a bonus that you're going to be getting as a percentage of the unhappiness that you're getting from the source. On top of that, this bonus scales with levels. So if you've got a high leveled commander, you're going to be receiving a higher bonus than if it is a lower level commander. Let's of course take our upgrades, why not? So if you've got a higher level commander, it will offset more unhappiness than if you've got a lower level commander. That's my current understanding. Keep in mind, I'm just going to caveat everything in this video with that's from what I've seen and what I've tested right now. So back to the original question of the video. Is going over the settlement limit in Civ 7 actually worth it? The answer is yes, but it depends, as all good answers actually do. It's a case-by-case basis, and it will depend on your circumstances, depending on your civ, depending on the leader that you're playing, the mementos that you take, and the tech path that you're taking. All of these are going to be considerations. I think the golden rules provide a nice outline for people, but at the end of the day, there is no 100% answer for this question as to whether it's actually worth it, because there might be circumstances where it's just simply not. You could be focused around playing a celebration style of leader, and that means that it's incredibly important that you maintain happiness in your settlements. As an example, Charlemagne, who gets bonuses from celebrations. So a key component for him is going to be making sure that everything is happy all the time, contributing to that global happiness. And a key component of that will be not going above that settlement limit. Other leaders you can be a little bit more flexible with, especially leaders that have got higher potential max settlement caps. So Now that we've gone through the golden rules, we've finally gotten to our question. Unfortunately, the answer is a little bit inconclusive. It does unfortunately depend, but hopefully we've added to the discourse with this video, and hopefully it's been reliable, and we'll look to age well. But other than that, we'll leave it there. If you've enjoyed the video, please leave a like down below. If you've got any questions, feel free to leave a comment or join the Discord where you can discuss this video or many other things. And of course, if you're looking forward to more Civ 7 content, then please make sure you hit the subscribe button, because there is always time for one more turn.